Hello, my name is Connor,
And I'm Jason.
and you're listening to the Amazed and Perplexed podcast. Hey, if you could do me and Jason a favor, me being Connor, if you could do me a favor and go to, right now, even if you're driving, pull on the side of the road, I don't care what appointments you have to meet, maybe if you're going to the hospital, but it better be really serious, and, God will know if, know what happened. But if you could do us a favor, and whatever podcasting app you're using to listen to us, if you could go and give us 5 stars, give us a thumbs up, give us a like, whatever it is on whatever mechanism you use, whatever mechanism of review that your podcasting app uses, if you would just give us the best possible review that you could, that would just really bless us. And man, we just encourage you, if there's anybody in your life who you feel like would benefit from a different approach to scripture than what most people do, who would appreciate earnest and honest questioning, who would appreciate vulnerability, I think that those are the things we aim for with the Amazed and Perplexed podcast. And so we just encourage you, we put this before you every now and then. If there's anybody in your life who has a hard relationship with the church, or has a difficult relationship with the Bible, or people who proclaim the Bible, we just humbly put before you, maybe this would be an avenue that you would be able to put before them, that God would possibly be able to speak to them in. And so, man, if that's the case, awesome. If it's not the case, that's also okay. But we just want to put that before you.
Yeah, so today we're going to be looking at Mark chapter 7, verse 31. It says, "Then Jesus left the vicinity of Tyre and went through Sidon, down to the Sea of Galilee and into the region of the Decapolis. There some people brought to him a man who was deaf and could hardly talk, and they begged Jesus to place his hand on him. After he took him aside, away from the crowd, Jesus put his fingers into the man's ears. Then he spit and touched the man's tongue. He looked up to heaven and with a deep sigh said to him," yeah, there you go. Man, that's a lot of PHs together. "Ephphatha," which means be opened. At this, the man's ears were opened. His tongue was loosened and he began to speak plainly. Jesus commanded them not to tell anyone, but the more he did so, the more they kept talking about it. People were overwhelmed with amazement. "He has done everything well," they said. "He even makes the deaf hear and the mute speak." So, Connor, What amazes you about this encounter?
So I know I previously, before I had children, I always hated when people, like, anything that they lived out, they equated right back to their children. But I'm very guilty of that, so I'm going to do it anyways. So before 6 months ago, before Indigo was born, I won't say I live a pristine life, but I lived a very clean life. I lived a very, there wasn't, like, my wife and I have been married. There's like no major problems. So I'm not cleaning up any messes, not dealing with that many bodily fluids, not dealing, there's very few things that I'm like viscerally in the space of somebody. But then when my daughter came along, that no longer became the case, and, had to deal with all sort of bodily fluids, and had to routinely, we had this little device where we have to, like, she had a really bad runny nose, and we had to, like, suction cup her nose and, like, suck out the snot, which that is just like one of the more humbling experiences. And I had a friend tell me that he saw his mom do that for his nephew without the device, and just, like, stuck her nose on her.
No.
Yeah.
That's enough.
No, but there are things like that. There are things like, I feel so bad if my daughter ever actually comes back and listens to these in like 20 years, but like giving our daughter a suppositor. There's so many like nitty gritty things that we have had to do for our daughter that are just really up close and personal, that I, up to this point in my life, have got to avoid most of the time, being really visceral in the vicinity of somebody. And this is a very bizarre passage, a very bizarre way of healing somebody. But I love the way that Jesus, Jesus is so viscerally of the world here. He is so fully human, and so we could have this picture of Jesus floating, but like, maybe he would travel from town to town, but like maybe he's levitating off the ground. Maybe he's like, he like his robe is like extra clean. He doesn't have to bleach it. He doesn't have to, do anything. He's very pure. He's very pristine. And this passage, this thing here, it leaves no doubt that Jesus is fully in the muck and the mire of the world. And we can talk about that in terms of sin, but I just love this this image that Jesus gives us, that we get here of Jesus, of him just existing viscerally in the world, in a gross sort of way, in a way that makes like here's the funny thing. When I'm clean, like when my daughter like is blowing out a diaper, I'm not thinking, man, isn't God good? Or I'm not thinking like ethereal, profound thoughts. Like I'm in the moment because there's a blown out diaper in front of me. And this is something that really grounds Jesus in the story. It grounds Jesus in his humanity, in his personhood. It grounds him in the moment that he existed. And I think that's just a very cool thing, because I think a lot of times for me, I like to think about Jesus as the guy floating above it all. You know, he's existing above it all, but it just so firmly grounds Jesus in his humanity and where he's at.
Yeah, and there was so much about clean and unclean in their culture.
Oh yeah, I didn't even touch on that.
And I think it was both a physical but also a spiritual, and they equated those dynamics, you know, a lot together. There's lots of ritual cleanness, and I don't know about the parameters on a deaf and a dumb person, mute person, but it's the idea that certainly this guy wasn't elite, and I don't even get the sense that Jewish men even touched him much. That picture of Jesus having his finger in the guy's ears, that just cracks me up so much. And then the dynamic, and I don't know, maybe we should check out the version, then he spit and touched the man's tongue. Is this a correlated activity? Is like he's got his fingers in his ears, and then he spits. Does he spit on his fingers?
This is a proto wet willy. This is the precursor to the wet willy.
I was like, does the man at all be like, he just had his finger in my ear? Like, I don't even put my finger in my own ear and put it in my mouth. And so it's you're right. It's
maybe you're missing out on something.
I'm like, I'm going to be in front of the church this next Sunday. Hey, you're going to be on stage with me. And before we go on, I want to do a very spiritual thing. And I'll put my fingers right in your ears and then put it in your mouth. That is that just so, yeah, it's just so odd like that. I'll tell you what amazes me about this is the comprehensive nature of the healing. And I see this in other places, but it just captivated me today. This guy the fact that they know that it says he could hardly talk, and I don't know what levels of muteness is, but that means he was trying. You know, so he's trying, and you just think about the lack of clarity. And I've been around for a while. I spent quite a bit of time around people in deaf community, and many of them, especially when the majority of people are deaf around them, they will talk out loud. Many times when they're around hearing people, they restrain themselves, but you know, they're talking. And especially, even if you don't know sign language, if you watch them and they have a bit of the words, you know, you can kind of put it together, but you have to listen really hard, almost listening to a young child, and you're trying to make it out. Or if anytime you're in another culture and there's somebody in language and you know a few words and you're really trying to piece together. So there's a lot of brain power, and the comprehensive nature of him not just doing his vowels, you know, or just, you know, his basic, but he's speaking fluidly. And the hearing piece is there too, but just the comprehensive nature. There's no retraining. I mean, he doesn't just heal the physical impediment. He also heals the brain, which has shaped those words.
He builds up muscles. He builds it.
Yeah. I mean, it's just so transformative, which is always what causes me to question healing in our time. And God can do whatever he wants. So if you have the gift of healing, I'm not spending any time tearing that down. I'm just saying, I have yet to witness it be like Jesus did, where it's so comprehensive. It wasn't just you have a disease, you no longer have a disease, but it is saying, here's something you've lacked, maybe forever, and I would assume in this case, probably forever. And it's just all of a sudden he built up all those muscles and then the brain to be able to work together. I mean, how much retraining do people have to go through when, even if science can fix a piece of it? And then the amazement of the people. Like, I can almost see their faces. I laughed when I was reading this, because just seeing their faces being so amazed that he's talking to them, and how frustrating it may have been for him wanting to say something, you know what I mean? Wanting them to hear this. I've been meaning to tell you this, and they're just so excited he can talk. They're not even listening to him in my mind, you know, they're just so excited.
Yeah, there's a version of this where Jesus just gives them the ability, like he just heals them of the deafness and the muteness, but it doesn't supernaturally give him this gift of being able to connect his thoughts, and the supernatural gift of building up the muscles, that it almost becomes worse for him, like afterwards. There's a version of this where it becomes like almost like he had no idea what he wished for. It would have been so easy for Jesus to do this, and then him be like, oh, I had no idea, like that I had this whole road in front of me of recovery, and this whole road of relearning, and it could have become an even bigger like personal piece of hell. And like it would have been so easy for Jesus to give exactly what that man had asked for and exactly what his friends had asked for, and it still not work out. And so Jesus hears the requests of his friends, hears the request for this man, and takes it, and then he goes even further than he would have to. And I wonder, like, how long did it take for that guy to really think about it? Like, how long did it take for him to go, wait a second, like, you know, like my voice feels, not only can I speak, not only can I hear, but like it all feels different. It all connects differently.
Yes.
There's like, I'm like, that is such a, I think we talked about it recently. That is such a drastically altering of somebody's life. That is a clear distinction of a before and an after. And man, that is just crazy.
It is. And you just think of the whole, this is like the day after. I always want the next day, you know, and he's like, oh, like every disadvantage you have, there's something that's advantageous about it on some level. So he's going to lose that advantage. And now he's got to move in. I especially think about the people in the Bible that are paralyzed, or some kind of impediment that's a corollary to that, and so they're begging or this kind of thing. Well, now they got to get a job, and now they got to, and I'm sure there's mostly happiness about that, but God's going to have to work with them the day after the healing too. You know what I mean? Because there's still sinful humanity, and there's still their dynamics in their life.
Absolutely.
So for me, I'm going to jump into what perplexes me, at the risk of stealing yours, because I don't know where you were at, but this dynamic, and I first noticed it when it says in verse 33, after he took him aside away from the crowd. Why in the world would you do that? I was trying to think, is there other examples of there being a crowd that he doesn't just do it? Matter of fact, one of the Pharisees' critiques of him is, you know, when we've covered encounters where Jesus heals somebody in the synagogue or in a gathering place on the Sabbath, where it had been so easy for Jesus to say, hey, person, why don't you come over here? He heals that person, and now there's no Sabbath tension. Now, of course, Jesus is doing that to present him as the Lord of the Sabbath. Jesus is doing that to present, wait, we've got this Sabbath thing wrong because it's become a human control thing, not a rest with God thing. You know what I mean? And I get that. But it's fascinating to me here, he pulls him aside. Now, the man goes and talks to these people again, and they're amazed. But Jesus, and this is really what kind of cracked me up, it says, Jesus commanded them not to tell anyone. So Jesus is like, hey, guys, don't tell anyone. But the more he did so, that means he's doing it again. Hey, I said don't tell anyone. And they're telling me right there, hey, stop that. You know, and now I've got this picture of the parent that, and I'm this parent at times, especially when my kids are younger, where it's like, hey, nope, no. Okay, no, you know, and it's just such a funny scene of this God who can literally, you know, this man God who can control the tongue and make it speak, now is not making it be quiet, or can't make it be quiet. And that's just, it's this perplexing thing is, how do you have so much respect for him? So it's not two-sided. Number one, why is he wanting to keep it quiet? And then the second is, they respect him so much, but they will not obey him.
Man, I had never even thought about that. Man, that, like, the picture you paint there is so, man, it speaks so much to how highly God prizes free will and the ability of his creation to make choices, that he gives the ability, like immediately gives the ability for this man to go and do exactly what he doesn't want him to do. I mean, that, like, it's so, like, when you say it, like, that's perplexing, but that's what God has done forever. Like, God has given us that ability forever. And man, like, that connection is so fascinating. And the fact that, like, that this happens, and yet, like, there's no picture of Jesus being like, oh, I shouldn't have healed that guy, or I shouldn't have given an opportunity, or I shouldn't, like, that is a connection that I hadn't made. And maybe that's a connection that everybody's made always, but I had not connected that before.
Yeah. And I think, you know, if I were to try to answer my own question, this goes back to other times when we've talked about Jesus telling stories that were not easy to pick up on. There's that part that he doesn't want, how do I say this? Well, and there's other, I don't know how to make this consistent, but my sense is he's trying to say, let's not lead with the spectacular. Let's not lead with, I want people to come to me to connect with God, and I'm doing these miracles to point them to God, you know? But it's like, it's so futile, number one, and why even put forth an effort to quiet it, knowing our propensity to just be so excited.
You started off your perplexing talking about the question of why does Jesus draw him away, and I wonder if it's because these people bring this man, so assuming they have some sort of responsibility, some sort of obligation to this man, and an expectation that Jesus can heal them and maybe help him, or also lighten their burden, or whatever their motivations would be. And Jesus takes something that could have been a communal event and makes it a very personal connection, a personal interaction with this man. And then he wants to keep continuing that to just be a personal interaction, just be a personal thing. And that in itself is perplexing. Like, so much of the time, Jesus is about, like, the kingdom is about making those broader community connections, making those, like, deeper impacts with more and more people. But here, it seems like what Jesus is really after, specifically with this guy, is to have an interaction, to have a encounter with him that is just about him and just about Jesus. And that's a fascinating dynamic.
That very much is. So what perplexes you?
Yeah, I think what perplexes me kind of comes down to, in verse 34, he looked up to heaven with a deep sigh, said to him, be opened. It's just that deep sigh of the dynamic of Jesus healing here. What are the emotions that Jesus is feeling here? What are the, where does the sigh come from? Is it a sigh of relief? Is it a sigh of man, Jesus is taking in all of that this person that he loves has gone through, and all this person is he thinking about the ramifications of, I'm healing this person and he's going to have these problems and new problems? Like, where is the sigh, or is it a happiness that, man, I'm getting to help and fix this person that I love and that I'm coming to die for? Just where that sigh, like, how. What are the human emotions that Jesus is feeling? You talked about it with, like, when Jesus is like, is he going to be frustrated because people keep talking about all the things he does when he tells them not to? What are the feelings that he has as he heals this man?
What I totally love is when you started talking about that, I'm like, deep sigh. Like, I read the scripture and I read those words for sure, and I had no memory of that. That's what. That always is mind-blowing about what sticks and what doesn't. That is fascinating. And the timing of it. Mm-hmm. Like, usually, okay, is there any way to do a deep sigh that's like, like deep sigh is almost always, I'm exhausted, or
not again.
I can't believe it, I'm out of breath. Like I can't think of a positive deep sigh. I'm like, yay, you gave me $1 million. I mean, that's not even, that's an inhalation. I can't imagine a deep sigh that is positive. And so I'm like, where is that emotion coming from? Like, is he just humanity? Man, they're so hurt and so wounded, and it never ends. Is it?
Does he sense that, hey, is it the sense of, like, hey, he's gonna betray, like, I give him this gift and he's gonna use it to betray what I want? Is it like
this is, even me pulling him aside, it's not gonna stop him?
Yeah. And I have to, like, if Jesus had that foreknowledge in this specific circumstance, man, I've been in situations before where I did something for somebody that I knew was not only going to not be repaid, but I was going to, like, have to pay even more for, that I was going to, like, cause further hurt for me down the road. I think about what it was like for Jesus to know when he was with the disciples, man, these people are going to betray, man, they're not, like that must have been a full night of deep sighs. But just to have that connection, because, like, okay, Jesus thinks about, like, man, in a few hours, these people are going to betray me. In a couple of minutes when they come, but, like, to have that, so it's such a visceral turnaround to know that this singular deed that I'm doing here is going, like, this person is then going to go and do the exact opposite of what I ask. But that has to take a toll. Like, that has to be something that weighs on Jesus. And so, I'm not sure. I don't know if we can know. Maybe there's some cultural thing that somebody will tell us, or we'll read in our own separate study of maybe deep sigh meant something very specific and connected back to something. I don't know.
And regardless of why Jesus didn't want him or the others to tell people about it, he's not wasting his words. I mean, I'm really a firm believer in the words in the Bible are there for deep purpose, even if it seems throwaway to me. Even the genealogies, I've heard some lessons on genealogies that were just mind-blowing and amazing, even though all my readings through genealogies is like a slog, and I may, in fact, skip them and that kind of thing. But there's no throwaway words. So Jesus, regardless of his motivation, he's not saying this for no reason. So, and I think he knows the human capacity, which then makes me more perplexed. Why ask in the first place? If you have a sense that I know how humans go when they're amazed, and this is a good message from our podcast. Even when I'm amazed by something, I share it. And so, if I'm truly amazed by God's word, I'm like, man, God didn't open my eyes to this so that I could just only have it for me. You know what I mean? Like, who might he want me to share this with? And that's stepping away from our purpose here. But it is that dynamic of just thinking about, he knew how amazed people behave. And yet it was important enough for him to say, hey, if there's any way we can just not share this, that'd be better. So anticipating frustration, to me, that's a reasonable dynamic. The other part is, this is one of those things, I mean, I hadn't thought about it much, but when I'm with Jesus, I'm like, let's run through that. What were you spitting on your own hands? Did you spit as a? I don't even know what to make of it, because it doesn't say he spit on his fingers. It just said he spit, and then he touched his tongue, and it's like, and he couldn't put more than one finger in the guy's ear. You know what I mean? So it's not necessarily put the same finger in the ear. Now you're like, what are you talking about? But my point is, why all this? So why not just say, and he healed him?
And we talk about this all the time. For somebody who sees this, could be like, oh, how we heal people, how we like do the work of God is we have to put fingers in the ears and we have to spit. And this is, now we're starting the cult of, wet willy. And this is like, and this is the way we do things. And I think, is that the reason Jesus does this? Because sometimes he speaks a word or he lays his hand and people are healed and their lives are changed forever. And so like, there would be this sense of like, this is Jesus over and over and over again refusing to be put in a box and made to be like, oh, here's your system. Here's how you do things over and over again. Here's how you do things. Here's how you work. I've got what you do down to a science. And I think about like if the disciples see this right, and they're given the power to go and heal. Like, is there anybody who ever tries this again? Is there anybody who ever does it? And you mentioned before, I have to believe that this is some sort of political statement, some sort of religious statement on the unclean, and like that has to be part of what's going on here. Better ministers or better men of God maybe would just know it off the top of their head, but I have to believe that there's something here that Jesus is not only grounding himself in this moment and grounding himself as a human, but he's also grounding himself with the people who have been outcast, with the people who have been looked upon as less, who have not received their reward this side. And so that has to be at least a part of it.
Yeah, I will say that picture of them maintaining this for the people that see this, like, now, okay, which fingers? And then you jump ahead in time, and it's like, I'm a seventh generation healer, and my methodology is always to put my finger in the guy's ears and touch his tongue, and this area, Tyre and Sidon, Jesus later will say, hey, it's going to be easier for Sodom and Gomorrah than for you guys, because you had the word and you just flat rejected it. And so to do something so amazing, and then the story spreads, and then he's rejected, it would be the kind of people that would try to, and this is how I think we are at church so many times, is we're like, I just need a better methodology. If you just give me a better methodology, because humans want methodologies. Well, you just saw a methodology, and from the disciples' perspective, I just wonder if they're sitting around and going, why did he never do the ear thing again? Like, why did he do it in the first place? And then why did he never do the same methodology again? And I'm sure, as you say, there's probably somebody that has a good answer for what this was signaling to that community, because we're told specifically, oftentimes we don't know where stuff takes place. We're told specifically this case, it took place in this area, in these 10 cities areas. So it is fascinating, God,
for sure. And I think this is something I know I do, like when we do these podcasts or I do my study and I'll read something, and like my whole life will be, for the next 2 or 3 days will be consumed with this specific passage, these specific teachings. And man, everything I do will be viewed through these lenses. And that's not bad. I think that's a natural process of studying the Word of God. But I think this is one of the things when we become so focused on one specific act or one specific like we know this, like for the people that live their life and they're focused on their glory days in high school, they're focused on they're focused only on their job, or they're only focused solely on their kids, and they have no other interest, nothing comes into play with how they view life except for this one specific area of their life. And it's almost like one of the things that Jesus is trying to communicate to us is trying to say of like, hey, listen, like maybe there are other like I think we as followers of Jesus have a tendency to be like, man, the Sermon on the Mount really speaks to me, or man, these parables really speak to me, and I'm diving in, I'm basing my whole following of Jesus on this one concept, on this one idea, on this one story. And stories like this are things where it's like, you can't take this story and be like, I'm going to build a movement off of it, right? Like you can take a parable and just blow it up and just really pull it out and really devise a lifestyle, devise a religion around the whole thing and make something out of it that wasn't intended to be. But this is a story, this is a moment, this is a life-changing event, a miraculous event that you can't then pull all these things out of it and make it into a movement. Like it's something that Jesus, like and so for me, I think that is a helpful instruction at the very least of being intentional about when I get excited about the Word of God, I get excited about a story of Jesus, to really put it in its proper place, to put it in the whole context of the life of Jesus and ultimately of what God is doing here on earth from the beginning.
And I think a lot of times with exactly what you're saying there, when you run into somebody and they are very over-focused on one aspect of the teaching, in the same way that we could relate it back to this group of people, my sense is it didn't resonate. The message of the gospel didn't resonate enough to avoid Jesus's later condemnation. And so it just didn't catch in this area. The people weren't, searching or however that goes. Like they wanted the miracle, but not the Messiah kind of feel. I think oftentimes we can do that where our doctrine, where our life becomes lopsided, because I know people that are super fixated on prophecy, or super fixated on end times, or super fixated on it's just about serving and we need to just be serving, as if all these other passages don't exist. And I think a lot of it stems that way. We all have natural passions that will drive us into something. And I just wonder, it'd be easy to see how a first century audience would get fixated by the miracle and just lose the perspective of any teaching that was there, and then to realize I do the same thing. I will get really captivated into dynamics that are like you were saying, like, man, this really fires me up, and I need to keep stepping back and saying, God, I don't want to reproduce that. I don't want to reproduce that dynamic of becoming fixated with an aspect of the gospel and then losing sight of who you are. Because yes, that's a piece of you. It's just not the totality of you.
Thank you for listening to the Amazed and Perplexed podcast. Jason and I super appreciate it. We pray it blesses you and grows you closer to your Creator. Grace, peace, and love.
You're not going to include all this. Because I'm going to try to pick up from what you just said.
If you legitimately have something to say, then yeah, pick.
Yeah, absolutely. It's just most of the time I get a sense you're saying the final thing, so that's why I stopped.
Oh, sorry.
I can always say more stuff.
Say more stuff. Say more things.
All right, here we go.